Welcome, one and all, to another episode of Pacific 4 and 4 episode review. I'm your host, Mike, and yes, like I said last week, I did cancel my Disney Plus subscription. But since it doesn't expire for a while, I'm going to continue to review shows like WandaVision, and I'm also going to give Falcon and the Winter Soldier a shot as well before it officially expires. But again, that's a long ways away because today I'm going to be reviewing WandaVision Season 1, Episode 7, Breaking the Fourth Wall. And that's pretty much what this episode did. It broke the fourth wall like any show like The Real World, Road Rules, or modern sitcoms like Modern Family. And in this episode, we, you know, see a little glimpse of that. We also see that Wanda really has no control over the environment anymore because things start phasing in and out and changing to different things from different eras. But before I get too far ahead of myself, this episode, starts off with Wanda waking up in her bedroom and Vision's not next to her. The boys are freaking out because their game system keeps changing on them, and what it keeps changing to is from a Wii controller to a GameCube controller, all the way back to an Atari 2600 controller. Although maybe it was just me, maybe I didn't see him because I wasn't supposed to see him, but it didn't appear that the Atari controllers had any wires to them. So that would be technically inaccurate for the controllers for that particular console, because wireless controllers didn't come in till later in the early video game era, and to have any kind of Bluetooth technology, well, that wasn't around either, because even the wireless controllers we did have that were battery operated, they required infrared signals and they weren't always reliable. But hey, that's just me nitpicking. But anyways, we see that Wanda isn't in control. We also find out that she slept in her costume, and she's shown speaking directly to the audience through the camera, just like I said, just like Real World, Road Rules, or even Modern Family. And meanwhile, Sword is positioned themselves 8 miles outside of the Westview barrier, and they're going in, and they have a plan. Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that. But they have a plan, but so does Monica Rambeau. And her plan is to take a rover into the barrier and get Wanda out of there and try to stop everything that's happening. Meanwhile, back in the barrier, we see Vision around the carnival, and we also see Darcy, whose act is to break out of chains. Well, she breaks out of the chains. Vision walks up to her, starts talking to her, asks her She even remembers him. She does it because of being inside the barrier. And it's not until Vision puts his fingers up to her head and gets her out of this trance that she's in under a Wanda spell where they start talking. And long story short, it all leads to Darcy giving Vision basically a refresher, catching him up to speed as to what went on, prior to him winding up in Westview. And as Darcy and Vision are leaving this carnival, Vision's mistaken as being part of the carnival act. He's mistaken for being a clown, which, if you've noticed in this episode, all the sword agents were turned into clowns, and their vehicles were turned into various clown cars, etc. But Vision's mistaken for one of the acts, and the ringmaster, I don't know if he was a ringmaster, but somebody who was affiliated in this world with the circus said that the lions are done and he was on next, and he and Darcy end up leaving in this truck, which goes very slow, and they even encounter a four-way stop where a road crew comes along to work on the traffic signal that's there. And Vision says that he feels that Wanda is deliberately doing this, deliberately delaying them from getting back home. And this is when Darcy starts giving Vision the refresher course as to, what his life was like before winding up in Westview. And Vision then proceeds to go through the truck and fly off back toward home. Meanwhile, Monica Rambeau, like I said, she meets up with a few soldiers that were loyal to her and they were loyal to her mother. And they have a rover, which they feel can go into the barrier, but they're not quite sure. Jimmy Woo even alludes to the fact that they don't have Darcy there to give her stamp of approval, but they proceed to go through with the plan anyway by trying to use the truck to break through the barrier. And long story short, and if you've watched my reviews before, you've probably gotten used to me saying a long story short. But long story short, the plan fails. But what we also see in this episode is Monica's eyes. They glow blue because of the radiation that she's already been exposed to due to being within the Westview barrier. So what ends up happening is Monica ends up going through the barrier. We see different phases of the barrier, meaning the different eras of sitcoms. We hear echoes of other voices from Nick Fury to Carol Danvers to Monica's mother. And she ends up getting through the barrier and starts running toward Wanda and Vision's house. Upon getting there, she ends up going through the door. Now, what ends up happening even before this is Agnes comes by the house and somehow knows that Wanda's under stress and offers to take the boys over to her house so Wanda can have her own quarantine staycation so she can get her thoughts together. The boys end up going with Agnes over to her house, and you know they start talking with Agnes, and even I believe it was Billy or Tommy, one of the two twins, says that with Agnes that she's quiet on the outside, but she's got a lot going on the inside. And what ends up happening when Monica shows up at Wanda's house is Agnes becomes aware of this because Wanda and Monica are having a confrontation because Wanda doesn't want Monica there. Agnes comes over and tells Monica she really shouldn't be there and takes Wanda away back to her house, and it leaves Monica there standing in front of Wanda's house all by herself. And Agnes and Wanda end up going inside Agnes's house. And what ends up happening is Wanda realizes the boys aren't anywhere to be found. There's half eaten sandwiches left on a coffee table on some plates. Wanda makes her way into the basement because we have. Hold on, TK. I'll talk to you after I get this done. But, anyways, we have Agnes and Wanda inquires about the boys, and, you know, Agnes says that they're probably playing down in the basement. Well, Wanda wanders down into the basement. Hold on one second. I'll call TK back after I'm done with this. But, anyways, Wanda goes down into the basement, and it's this dingy, dark, grungy looking basement. And as she starts walking through, we see roots and we start seeing other things. And then we see Agnes show up and say, Wanda, you're not the only one with powers, after Wanda inquires about where are the boys. And as a lot of people have alluded to, that I've seen in other videos, I've even had people mention it to me after my videos have been over. I've even had one person mention who it could be during last week's episode review. Well, it turns out that it's Agatha Harkness. Now, I will admit I'm not that familiar with the character. I didn't read the WandaVision comic series. I'm sorry, so this is all new to me. Even Mephisto, I'm not familiar with that character either. You know, I've read some comics. I just didn't read every single comic that ever came out from DC and Marvel. But anyways, it's Agatha Harkness who's been behind this whole thing all along. And we got a little video intro of her causing mischief and creating trouble. And then it leads to Monica Rambeau going to the cellar after trying to get into Agatha's house, and she opens up the cellar and her eyes are glowing, and we see purple hues all along the sides of the walls with the roots. And the last thing we see is Quicksilver showing up and saying Snoops will be Snoops. So it leaves us on a cliffhanger as to what's going to happen in next week's episode. Now, I really did enjoy this episode because I enjoyed the fact that it, unveiled a lot more information. And, there were questions being asked by Vision as to what his life was like before all this happened. And he starts questioning as to why he doesn't remember anything that's going on. We come to find out that Director Hayward was trying to reactivate Vision, and he was unsuccessful before Wanda came and took Vision's body and brought him into this little alternate universe, little bubble that she's created. And she even admits, Wanda even admits in this episode that she created all of this But we can see that Agatha's shown up and she's changing the rules as she sees fit to get things her way. So things are still very interesting. We still have 2 episodes left in this miniseries, so we'll see what happens. I've seen online where some people are speculating, that there's still a big surprise showing up. I don't know. No. Could it be Mephisto? Could it be, maybe Magneto, like some have speculated? Or could it be somebody completely out of left field that nobody expects to show up? Well, we'll find out, of course, if anyone actually shows up. But overall, this was a good episode. I did like the fact that you actually got to see what it was like for Monica to go through the barrier, from the real world into this Westview alternate reality. So I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the fact that Vision got a backstory from Darcy as to what his life was like before. The fact that he was only a sophisticated AI system, that he was Jarvis before Ultron created the synthoid body, which eventually became Vision's body, Jarvis's new body. I did like that we got, that backstory. And, I just like the fact that, you know, Jimmy and Monica worked pretty good together with the limited time they were actually on screen together, and that we see that, Hayward and Monica have 2 different goals. Hayward's goal is to destroy the barrier and possibly destroy Wanda, while Monica's goal is to rescue Wanda and try to get her to collapse this barrier, this world between worlds, if you want to even call it that. So that was very good. There's really not much I can nitpick on this episode, and I'm sure there were Easter eggs that flew over my head, but I did find it interesting that, again, with one of the commercials, it did drop a subtle hint by introducing this pill that basically it said what's been going on this whole series, that Monica is pretty much under a spell. Not Monica. Well, yeah, Monica was under a spell, but Wanda is pretty much under a spell because of Agatha Harkness, aka Agnes, and because of this, reality is being distorted, and it's giving Wanda that illusion of the perfect reality that unfortunately she doesn't have outside of this Westwood anomaly. So, it again, it was a good episode. I will continue to review WandaVision because, like I said before anyone wants to say, I thought you said you canceled your Disney Plus subscription. I did. It doesn't run out for a while. I'm not saying when. Just know that I will continue to give reviews. I'm just not going to give Disney a new subscription. That's all. So, again, this was a good episode. There are many things to like about this episode. The fact that you have Quicksilver showing up at the end, and the scene where Quicksilver shows up at the end when Monica's opened the cellar door, it's an end credit scene. So, yeah, as you can see right there on the screen, this does say spoiler review. So, if you didn't want to hear that and you didn't heed the fact that it was a spoiler review, well, sorry, but you were warned. But could Quicksilver be Mephisto? I don't know. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not familiar with you know the comics as far as Vision and Wanda's comic. and some of the characters that were introduced in that. I'm sorry to say that I'm more familiar with the main Marvel characters than I am with some of the side characters, some of the sub characters. But, it's the same with DC. I'm more familiar with the likes of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Aquaman, just to name a few. And, you know, again, I like this episode. And I'm going to keep saying that. And I did like this episode. I thought it was well done. And really, there's not much for me to nitpick on. Maybe if I watch it later on, I'll find things to nitpick on. But for what this episode was trying to do, trying to, you know, give us more information than we have already received in the previous 6 episodes, I really enjoyed this episode. And just so you know, I still support Gina Carano. Just because I'm doing these reviews doesn't mean I don't support Gina Carano. And I'm going to say it one last time. Because the subscription doesn't expire for a while, you will still get episode reviews of Disney Plus series that I'm interested in watching until that subscription runs its course. So, I hope everyone has enjoyed this episode review. I hope I didn't spoil too much for you. If I did, again, you were warned. And, some people like to fade in. At this point, I'm going to fade out and give you the PACIFIC414 closing credits. So, take care. I will see you all later. Have a good weekend, and hopefully I'll be streaming with TKO sometime on Sunday. Don't know when, but just, keep yourselves posted to the PACIFIC414 Twitch page, the PACIFIC414, Twitter feed, on social media, Facebook. I'm putting it up here on screen right now. Just keep an eye on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and you'll see when I'm going live. So until then, this has been Mike for PACIFIC414 episode reviews. I hope you've all enjoyed this episode once again, and I will see you all later. Take care.